I don't know if this has gotten to the point of annoyance, but like, Wonder Woman's pretty cool, man. Regardless of how much you know about her lore or core comic stories, she paved the way female superheroes are seen in comics and broke the mold of female characters always being seen as damsels in distress who couldn't fend for themselves. Despite being one of the most recognizable superheroes and a member of DC's Big Three, most average superhero fans couldn't tell you much about her mythos beyond a surface level. Many people mistake this for her mythos being very boring or uninteresting, or more specifically that she has a lame rogues gallery, when in actuality, people's lack of knowledge on things Wonder Woman stems from the lack of adaptations over the decades. There are so many Batman depictions in comparison that it's hard to imagine anyone with a normal fondness of these characters incapable of naming 10 or so Batman villains off the dome. Wonder Woman has never had a proper outlet to expose her villains to the general public and flesh them out, unlike Superman and Batman the Animated Series or Teen Titans. Even lesser known characters have had mediums to focus on their comic continuity like Static. The dichotomy seen between Superman and Lex Luthor or Batman and Joker has never been touched upon for Wonder Woman in media, and even when it's being attempted with characters who would fit that role like Cheetah, the most popularized adaptations of those characters are never done justice, thus making it seem like she has no compelling villains. It also doesn't help how much Wonder Woman's mythos likes to fluctuate from writer to writer in the main DC Comics canon. Prolific Wonder Woman writer Gail Simone talked about how new writers disregard things that came before in previous Wonder Woman runs to start over with their own take to a degree that wouldn't be allowed for characters like Batman or Spider-Man. You can crack down the quote-unquote definitive adaptation for a particular comic character that defined how they were seen and depicted in the years following said adaptation. Batman the Animated Series gave us Harley Quinn and the modern iteration of Mr. Freeze, along with popularizing some of Batman's greatest adversaries and stories. You look at Spider-Man the Animated Series or the Raimi trilogy, where retellings of the symbiote arc in the movies and shows have been altered since the 90s. You see the impact the MCU has had on the public perception of previously lesser known characters who have grown immensely in popularity over the years. There are consistent defining traits the average Joe can latch onto. I guess the closest Wonder Woman has ever had to a defining adaptation is the DCEU and maybe the Linda Carter 70s show, but then you look at how both of those versions neglect the core nature of Diana's mythology. We know this for a fact, as to this day most people can't name many of Wonder Woman's villains or even side characters. The Wonder Woman solo movie already shot itself in the foot by establishing the fact that all of the Greek gods besides Ares were long dead and buried. The mere existence of Wonder Woman in the Amazons is tied to the Greek goddesses, as they were responsible for bringing her to life from clay and granting her all of her grand abilities. Having it so that they aren't around in any capacity severely limits the comic stories that could have been told, as well as the adversaries Wonder Woman herself could go up against on the big screen. Many would argue that Wonder Woman herself is very paradoxical when taking into account her being raised in an island of warrior women and trained in various forms of combat, while simultaneously being very compassionate and exhibiting a maternal-like kindness.
I mean, she's powerful. I mean, these are good things about her. At the same time, it makes her a difficult character to work with dramatically in a story. Is that she's strong. She's a kick-ass warrior, but she's also compassionate. She's wise, So it's like she's headstrong, but she's wise. It's like, well, how does that work? She kind of. It's like all of these things that are attributed to her in the comics are paradoxical.
Another prominent Wonder Woman writer, Phil Jimenez, explained well how her being a warrior and a pacifist isn't really a contradiction when you actually take a look at her history. Diana grew up in Paradise Island that valued love, peace, and strength through her training. Essentially, she was molded in an environment to shape her into the ideal ambassador to the world. But what makes her so different from her Amazon sisters is how she views the outside world in a more idealistic, hopeful perspective. The Amazons have had interactions with mankind and had a tragic experience before being sent off to Themyscira by the goddesses, growing a disdain for the outside world. With Diana's upbringing being shielded from man's world up until she left the island, that's where you'll see the differences in her ideology. The New 52 had somewhat of a stark contrast to how Wonder Woman would normally be depicted pre-New 52 and in DC continuity post-New 52, seen in Rebirth and beyond. It's like the God of War equivalent narrative is the thing people latch onto when not knowing much about Diana's morals or beliefs. You might have seen this one panel where Diana is explaining to Superman the reason she doesn't have an extensive rogues gallery like Batman, Superman, or the Flash is because she deals with them the proper way. And I'm not gonna lie, to put it frankly, this comic panel,
that shit was ass. No.
Wonder Woman isn't some bloodthirsty monster who prefers to kill her enemies. Her entire mission was to teach mankind the ways of the Amazons to further encourage peace and compassion in the modern day. Her humanitarian efforts, like the Wonder Woman Foundation, emphasize sharing the teachings and values of the Amazons, which include but are not limited to teaching farmers Amazon methods of soil preservation in ecologically damaged areas and building schools in poor rural areas. During Greg Rucka's run on Wonder Woman prior to his Rebirth run, Diana was an ambassador for Themyscira, representing the nation for the UN using public outreach to spread her mission for peace, as well as establishing a Themyscira embassy with a team to aid her in her ventures. The idea of Wonder Woman killing is only used as a last resort. There have been only a few times in post-crisis continuity where she had to kill someone, whether it would be ancient deities like Medusa, if that even counts. The only human to my knowledge she ever killed was Maxwell Lord. Maxwell Lord mind-controlled Superman, making him see Doomsday instead of Wonder Woman, thinking he'd murdered Lois Lane. Wonder Woman was fighting for her life against an all-out mind-controlled Superman, and she used the lasso of truth on Maxwell Lord to figure out how to stop him. Maxwell Lord assured her that he had no intent in stopping and was going to use his antics to kill Superman's loved ones and a bunch of other superheroes. Under the lasso of truth, when asked how to put a stop to all of this, he stated the only way was for Wonder Woman to kill him. So she said, "I bet," snapped his neck without hesitation. Batman and Superman gave her a bunch of crap about it leading into the events of Infinite Crisis, but the general public also wasn't too keen on Wonder Woman, as Maxwell Lord pulled a Mysterio from the end of Far From Home where he broadcasted footage of Wonder Woman killing him, making it seem like she killed an innocent man. I wouldn't go as far as deeming Maxwell Lord a prominent Wonder Woman villain, since really one of the only notable encounters they've had with each other relates to the infamous neck snap leading into Infinite Crisis, or Maxwell Lord wanting to seek revenge afterwards. In regards to her actual adversaries, Wonder Woman is willing to seek redemption for her villains if they allow it, especially for the ones with tragic backstories like Silver Swan or Cheetah. Another major issue with the little amount of adaptations featuring Wonder Woman villains is that they are often severely nerfed when compared to their comic counterparts. It raises the question on how some of these characters could even pose a physical threat to Diana in the first place. To some, it's like, oh, one of Wonder Woman's greatest adversaries is just some giant furry. Whether we're talking post-crisis or her Rebirth origin, Barbara Minerva was a British archaeologist intrigued by Greek mythology. She stumbled upon an ancient plant god that cursed her to transform into the cheetah with supernatural enhancements, and she has to feed on human flesh in order to survive. There's a stark contrast in both Cheetah and Wonder Woman's upbringings, as they were both granted gifts from a higher power. The Greek gods granted Wonder Woman life out of love and strength out of adoration, while Cheetah is more so punished and made to suffer. Cheetah's sheer strength and speed allows her to go toe-to-toe with Wonder Woman in hand-to-hand encounters, which is impressive given Wonder Woman's durability. Her speeds are nothing to sneeze at, as Cheetah has been ranked among the top 10 fastest characters in DC, alongside Wonder Woman and a bunch of other speedsters back in 2018. Since her abilities stem from magic, Cheetah is able to penetrate the defenses of Kryptonian characters like Superman.
Kryptonians are vulnerable to magic. And these claws cut like magic.
Compared to some of Batman's powerhouse villains like Bane, she's able to incapacitate them with little to no effort. Now imagine the levels of tomfoolery seen in DC animation, where Cheetah gets choked out by Catwoman using her whip only to then fall to her death, or get shot and killed in a few seconds in Justice League Dark Apocalypse War like she was some nameless background character. An average fight in some of these adaptations don't seem to pose that big of a challenge for Wonder Woman unless Cheetah receives some sort of boost that portrays her as more powerful than usual. Circe is another big Wonder Woman villain that is arguably her arch nemesis, with the other big contenders being Ares and Cheetah, a powerful magic user that's all about scheming and manipulation. Big spoiler warning for Creature Commandos, so if you haven't seen the show or don't know the general plot, here's your warning. Her most recent adaptation was in the first canonical DCEU project, Creature Commandos, where she wants to kill the princess of Pakistan in an effort to save the world, as she had a future vision of the princess teaming up with Gorilla Grodd, starting World War III, and killing all of the heroes in DC. The pilot briefly mentions her backstory, being an Amazon from Themyscira who wants to take the throne and rule the island nation. There's some malicious intent in her wanting to rule Themyscira, but her actions are more focused on justifiably trying to kill the princess, considering Princess Alana was in fact cartoonishly evil and wanted to rule the world.
I was trying to kill her to save the world.
But your resume doesn't exactly back up the Glenda the Good Witch routine.
Even the devil doesn't want to see the world die.
And we should believe you, why?
Circe had a multitude of different designs over the years, and I'm very glad she had a pretty decent looking costume in the show.
I'm thirsty for you.
Adaptations are never copy and paste, and even though I didn't dislike how the character was written, I was kind of surprised at the depowering of her magical abilities. She's a very capable fighter who had creative use of her sorcery at first, but it doesn't take that much to take her down, as she can't use her magic when her hands are restrained, and when caught off guard can get beaten by the likes of Weasel and Dr. Phosphorus.
You got knocked the fuck out, man!
Now sure, having a caveat to one's abilities is a good way to make sure they're not overpowered, but if you can't tangle with someone with basic superhuman speeds, I'm not exactly sure how she's supposed to pose any threat to the likes of Wonder Woman. I also think it would have been a better use of her character if she actually was manipulating Amanda Waller and conjured up a fake vision so that it would seem justifiable in her wanting to kill the princess. Perhaps in her efforts toward world domination and her plan to take over or destroy Themyscira, she could aspire to take Princess Alana's place in the vision. If all you needed was a magic user with the power of clairvoyance, then there really was no need to use Circe in particular. Replace her with Felix Faust or something and not much about the plot changes. Circe in the post-crisis continuity is a centuries-old sorceress who was the princess of Colchis, but was driven out of her nation after killing her husband, who she thought was weak. She sought refuge on an island to practice her magic and potions in an effort to gain more power. So much so, she was willing to sell her soul for it. Circe was approached by the moon goddess Hecate to become her instrument of the goddess's vengeance against the gods who wronged her and humanity that worshipped them. Circe was then granted immortality and incredible power. One of Circe's defining traits in her mastery of magic is her ability to turn men into different animals or beasts. For many years, she's proven to be a worthy adversary to Wonder Woman and her allies. Circe's kind of like Wonder Woman's warped mirror reflections, since they were both born by the whim of the Greek gods, and Circe stands in the way of Diana's mission for peace. There's always going to be a group of people who want to see nothing but your downfall. The sole purpose of wanting to make the world a better place by spreading peace, love, and all that other stuff, it's enough to make some people want to ruin your life. Take Veronica Cale for instance, a wealthy businesswoman who started her own pharmaceutical company with her college best friend. Grew up poor, raised by a single mom who died of cancer when Veronica was only 16 years old. But she was hella smart though. Earned her first PhD at 19, her second at 21, and her third at 22 years old. Veronica Cale believes that she's the embodiment of the American success story and actually earned her status, unlike Wonder Woman. She believes Wonder Woman is straight up a liar and a phony, working an agenda to spread peace and love on man's world, going as far as trying to defame and ruin Wonder Woman's reputation, working alongside villains like Dr. Psycho to take her down. The misogynist King Dr. Psycho serves as a really interesting antagonist to Wonder Woman due to how much of a mental obstacle he's proven to be. He has telepathic abilities that allow him to control the minds of other people. Psycho can make people see and feel things that aren't actually real, whether that be other people, objects, or different environments. It can create for some unique encounters for Wonder Woman and her allies that have to deal with psychic attacks and illusions that would trip up the average person. Also, this guy's treatment and resentment towards women is astronomical, but he puts any of these modern bozos to shame.
I thought it was so satisfying to watch all those people die! And that's when I decided to hate women.
I think Ares is one example as to why it's so important to maintain the Greek mythological roots for Wonder Woman. This isn't the type of villain you should see in a generic third act of a superhero movie that proceeds to kill him off and call it a day. His sense of manipulation and getting into people's heads is seen with the efforts he has on modern society's fascination with conflict and using that as his advantage to use others for his bidding. Being a Greek god himself, he's used his deception to take advantage of those above in Mount Olympus. Being named the god of war, Ares draws his power from belief in conflict, and has complete mastery of every form of combat and weaponry. One can only hope that more of Wonder Woman's mythos will be explored in future adaptations, and whatever the next mainstream version of the character will become prominent, most likely from the emergence of James Gunn's new universe. As far as we know, the only Wonder Woman related project in development is the Paradise Lost prequel show set before Diana's birth. Gunn did mention early on that he's been trying to get Wonder Woman into more animation, which is very warranted as the character is yet to have an animated series for some reason. If it ever comes out, the Wonder Woman game in development is set to take place on Themyscira and feature Diana going up against some of her better known adversaries on the island, as well as a plethora of mythological creatures. If there's ever a resurgence in Wonder Woman content, maybe it can finally change people's perception of the character and demonstrate why she's been a mainstay in DC Comics. Here's to hoping the DCU will give her the respect she deserves.